Hello, mates. Insane Bastard with you once again. So, been about a week since my last video. I'm still going on the subject of religion, but I have noticed that among this atheist community here on YouTube, there's been a bunch of new topics that have been popping up, and I want to examine them more carefully, but that's neither here nor there. I read Leviticus. I finished Leviticus a couple of days ago. I'm on Numbers right now, and I wanted to make this part 2, or not part 2, more like part 4, to my series about the Bible. Uh, the first 3 parts were about Genesis and Exodus. You can watch those. And if you want to watch those, I'll just go to my channel because I'm too lazy to fucking link them. But yeah, this was going to be the next part of my Bible series. But I mean, here's the thing about it. I read Leviticus. I didn't really get much out of it. It just seemed like pure barbaric tradition, fucking poor knowledge of medicine and sadistic God, and that's basically all Leviticus is. I can imagine some Christians watching this might be offended. I mean, whenever I talk to Christians, like whenever they were asking me why I read the Bible, I said just because I felt like it, and they they came across as feeling very, at first very confused, but then sort of happy. But it kind of felt like that happiness seemed like they were kind of expecting me to get a sort of higher truth from reading it, which is not my goal, nor has it happened yet. And for anyone who would say, "Oh, you're just not interpreting it right because you're an ignorant fucking pig," fuck you. You know, I've read fucking Exodus, Genesis, Leviticus so far, and if I haven't gotten any sort of higher truth out of them, it's not because there is higher truth in them, it's just because I would argue that because there isn't any higher truth out of them. And saying that me not getting any higher truth out of any of those books is because of my ignorance or because of my stubbornness, that's just a stupid and arrogant thing to say. So there's my little rant about that. So, to reiterate, Leviticus was barbaric tradition, sadism, and poor knowledge of the world. That's all it fucking was. Now, why, do you ask, are you not an atheist anymore? Well, it's quite simple, actually. My beliefs have not changed, but I did talk to a certain person in my life, and he brought up a very good point. This person was actually my English teacher, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and the subject of religion and versus atheism came up. And my friend was like, yeah, I'm actually a Christian, but atheism lately has been making a lot of sense. So, whatever. But then my English teacher came over, and he said, you know, the thing I find funny about atheism is that it requires just as much of a leap of faith as theism. And I, of course, asked him to explain himself. And he says, well, I mean, don't you think that it takes just as much of a leap of faith to believe that something doesn't exist based on no evidence as to not believe that, as to rather believe that it exists also based on no evidence? And I say, well, it's really, evidence or no evidence is a touching thing here because it's, the idea that there is a God is a positive claim, therefore that's the claim that requires positive evidence, and, you know, therefore you're not warranted in believing in God, whether, you know, given what evidence there is, or in this case there isn't. He says, yeah, but you're not warranted in believing that he doesn't exist either. I mean, you can't know 100% the truth. And I say, I agree, but, you know, you can still, I agree that you can't know ultimately whether there's a God or not, but you can still believe based on the evidence you have. And then he says, no, those who don't know, those who admit that they don't know, ultimately, those are agnostics. And those who 100% believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that there's no God, those are atheists. And he would know this kind of thing. Like, these are the official definitions here that he's using. And that, at first, didn't make any sense to me. Or, it made sense, but I thought it was wrong, simply because of the whole agnostic atheist mentality here on YouTube, where agnosticism and atheism are not mutually exclusive. As it turns out, they are. Fucking, Veritas was right when he said that. And here's how I came to the conclusion that my teacher's conclusion was right. I thought about it, and I thought, what is my position really? My position is that God might exist, but he probably doesn't. And that's pretty much the position of most so-called atheists here on YouTube, most self-proclaimed atheists. And what degree of certainty do I have that God does not exist? Well, my degree of certainty is just short of 100%, 99.99999%. That's how probably he doesn't exist, if that makes any sense. But at what threshold do you become an atheist? And I realized that any number that you could put there is arbitrary, essentially. So the whole thing with agnosticism being simply the position that you cannot know the ultimate truth, and atheism being the position that you can know the ultimate truth and that God does not exist, made more sense. And, theism, of course, is the position that you can know the ultimate truth and that God does exist. So, essentially, what we have here is atheism is what most atheists here on YouTube call Gnostic atheism. And the actual definition of agnosticism is simply what most atheists here on YouTube call agnosticism, but it includes both agnostic atheism and agnostic theism. And theism is what most atheists here on YouTube call Gnostic theism. And the whole Gnostic field does include preferences for both there being a God and there not being a God, but the whole deciding factor is whether whether or not you can know whether or not a God exists. And if you admit that you cannot know ultimately, you're an agnostic, whether or not you actually believe that God exists or not. That's, as I understand, the official definition, which is actually making a lot more sense now. So yeah, this has been the Insane Bastard. Peace the fuck out.